There's a reason that today, for the first time, most of America's richest counties surround Washington, D.C. Washington is where you go if you want special privileges. That's where they dole them out. And as government grows, they have more to dole out. And yet Washington is also where they say, we're all equal. We're all in this together. But when government is very big, that's a lie. George Orwell understood this when he wrote the novel Animal Farm.
All animals are equal.
Orwell was writing about communism, but the principles apply to America today. Government central planning hurts everyone a little, but rewards people with connections.
Outwardly, Animal Farm appeared prosperous, but the animals themselves were no better off, with the exception of the pigs.
The pigs in Animal Farm were the political leaders, and over time, they prospered at the other animals' expense. Their slogan, at least, was more honest than what our politicians say. Some animals are more equal than others. Today, the animals that are more equal are Washington politicians and their cronies, or people who aren't cronies but are rich enough to lobby the cronies who get close to the politicians. That's how, in the so-called Fiscal Cliff budget deal, Hollywood film producers got a special break. NASCAR got $70 million to build new racetracks. Algae growers got $60 million. Multinational corporations with offshore subsidiaries got a $9 billion tax break. It was disguised in convoluted language. The active financing exception to Subpart F. That's how Washington works. Now, Ellis Hennigan is a proud progressive who says it's right that our political leaders make some choices about who needs help. Maddie Doppler is with Americans for Tax Reform, which says we should shrink government so it can't make some animals more equal than others. So, Ellis, you really want them picking winners with all this $3 trillion that we've given?
Well, let me see if I can unpack this a second, John. If we're going to have government, if we're going to have laws, it is absolutely the case that some people will get some benefits in that. That said, the impact that government has is tiny, is trivial compared to the impact that the market has, that heredity has, that a number of other factors. If you want to be rich in this society, the best way is to be born that way. And if you're not born that way, marry a rich person. And if you don't marry a rich person, go into the market and sell some goods and services that people want. That'll get you rich a whole lot quicker than sucking up the government will.
Well, providing services somebody wants, that's fair, but having government give it to you because you know somebody isn't.
Well, but it's inevitable, John, that if we want government to do things for us, if we want roads and bridges and prisons and a military and a safety net, someone somewhere is going to benefit from that. But you can't use that as an excuse to not do important things for our society.
Maddie?
No libertarian out there is going to say that we shouldn't have any roads, we shouldn't have the government involved. The question is, who's building the roads? Can we do maybe a public-private partnership where taxpayers can make their investment back on the road rather than giving a contract away to unions who supported the politician who's asking to build the road? Those are the kind of questions we should be asking rather than saying, well, it's no road or no highway.
Keep government small so fewer of these choices are in the hands of politicians.
I agree.
Well, but again, you don't use some notion that, well, there's going to be someone a little ahead and a little behind to make important choices for us. I mean, someone, in Maddie's analogy, is going to have to build that road, and it might be your friend, and it might be John's friend, or someone else's friend.
Why are they giving money for NASCAR tracks?
Well, listen,
electric motorcycle makers.
I'm not going to defend every single tax break, but at least in government, John, those decisions are being made by people who are elected by the people.
That would be great if that were the case, but look at what happened with Obamacare. Even these representatives that we supposedly sent to Washington didn't read the law before it went into effect. The people who are making these decisions are the administrators at the EPA, the bureaucrats at HHS. These aren't folks that we have any accountability for.
You bring up Obamacare. It was supposed to treat us all equally, but surprise, members of Congress got a special subsidy. Senator Vitter grilled a health exchange director about that.
Is there any other large employer who gets the same treatment and gets to go to that exchange?
The congressional provision only applies to Congress.
So Congress is the only large employer who gets that special treatment?
It's a function of one of the provisions in the Affordable Care Act.
Congress gets a special deal. Republicans and Democrats oh, we don't want to hurt our staff and treat them like the rest of the country.
Listen, I don't understand why you all are so fixated on this. I mean, to work for Congress, there are some benefits you get by being a government employee. There's some things you lose. Most of those people, as you know, could make a whole lot more money out in the private sector. One of their bennies is some special break on health insurance. Why do we need to be so outraged about that?
The problem is that's not how the healthcare law was written. How the healthcare law was written is if you are dumped off of your employer's healthcare insurance and put into the exchange, your employer doesn't get to give you any more premium or any more subsidies for your premium for your healthcare costs. That's just the deal, and that's how it was written in the law. And the folks who wrote that law should have to abide by it as well.
Labor unions were big Obamacare supporters until after Obamacare passed and they read it and discovered, ooh, some of us will have to pay more.
If the Affordable Care Act is not fixed, then I believe it needs to be repealed. Now our health and welfare funds are under siege, but we'll be damned if we're going to lose our health insurance because of unintended consequences in a law, and it needs to be fixed now.
And presto, a few months later, HHS quietly published a rule that would exempt unions from the fee he just complained about. But others have to pay it. Why is that fair?
Well, listen, this is the way we fight this stuff out in a democratic society. Some people think, oh, no, these other people are getting more than I'm getting. But at least, again, John, it's not perfect, and you're absolutely right, Maddie. People have influence, and some groups are smarter about maneuvering than others. Some people have think tanks that help support them. But you know what? In the end, at least we're doing this in some kind of playing field where that's open to some sort of public debate. Isn't that better?
But what is the playing
What a low
field in this
standard.
situation? Yeah, right. I mean, we're talking about Obamacare here, which is already the law of the land, which is the refrain we've been hearing from the administration for months, if not years. But he gets to essentially play with the law of the land however he wants. He gets to give these dispensations to unions, to
451 waivers to unions.
More than that, I think even. It's not even the exemption on this fee that we're talking about. It's the cap on health care benefits that some companies are subject to under the law. I mean, unions went to the mattresses to try and get as much as they could out of the law to be exempt from it, and they really did quite well for themselves.
What about the IRS examinations? Isn't that unfair? Picking on Tea Party groups?
I think that the facts would suggest that that isn't true, that in fact they're trying to navigate through this Supreme Court decision that allows these political groups to take tax deductions when they're actually doing political stuff. And you know what? I agree with you. Let's get rid of that. Let's make it clean, and let's make all groups pay their fair share of taxes.
Does that include labor unions?
Absolutely.
All
Churches.
All right, we can agree on that, though it'd be nice if the taxes were lower. A final example. Certain investors get special privileges if they invest in what politicians call green energy. Even after the Solyndra debacle, President Obama told Congress he wants more money given to certain companies to pay for research on new forms of energy.
The private sector on its own will not invest in this research because it's too expensive. It's too risky. So we've got to support it. And we'll all benefit from it.
But we don't so much all benefit from it. Certain people benefit. Al Gore invests. He benefits.
John, dream with me on this. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if we had this renewable energy that didn't pollute anything?
What have we gotten from these investments in alternative energy?
The president, he said exactly what I think about these investments the government is making is that they're too risky for the private market. And that's because the private market is not going to bear industries that aren't solvent, that aren't productive, that aren't actually going to produce anything for consumers or for businesses. And there's a reason for that, and there's a good reason for that. It's because resources should be dedicated to industries and to enterprises that are going to help America, not hinder it.
Every time industry solves one of these problems, government doesn't have to do it. But these are the ones that the market has demonstrably failed us. So yeah, let's get together and invest.
So the market failed, the industry hasn't invented the perfect energy form, but the taxpayer should fund bureaucrats to do it?
You know what? It's better than giving it to those oil companies you were talking about earlier. At least you're with me on that,
well,
right?
That's quite a big difference.
They give us oil. I agree. We should have no subsidies, but the oil companies deliver.
But there's something extraordinarily different from handing Solyndra a $500 million check and allowing the oil industry to deduct the exact same thing that other manufacturers are allowed to deduct in the United States.
Maddie,
go ahead.
I'll tell you the difference. Okay. These are little growing companies. The oil industries are the most profitable corporate entities that man has ever known. They don't need it. These little growing guys do. They're going to help us.
But look how sleazy the Solyndra $500 million loss was. A Tulsa billionaire, George Kaiser, was a key Obama backer. He raised about 100,000, made several visits to the White House. And this is the guy who's behind Solyndra.
Listen, I'm not defending Solyndra. There's sleaze bags in every industry, and they may be one of them. But let's don't give up this idea of doing things as a society that'll make the world a better place. Don't throw
Even
that
though,
out.
look at this list of companies that taxpayers paid for that have gone bankrupt. Abound Solar, A123 Systems, Enerdell, a subsidiary, Enter1, Range Fuels, Beacon Power, and so on, one after the other that went broke.
And you look at all these too, they have ties all back to a Democrat administration. You know, like this is
Not all, but
not all,
many.
but most of them do.
They're
and it's
visiting
very
the White House.
You know, actually, it's interesting.
in the most open, honest administration in history that we were promised.
John, it
too.
sounds terrible when you read this funereal list of these companies that stumbled. In fact, I think if you look at it in a broader context, the failure rate of companies like this far less than in the private marketplace, right?
Well,
not every investment succeeds, whether it be a government investment or a private investment, but that doesn't mean we stop investing in our future.
But why should we have the government ensuring that some of them succeed, putting their thumb on the scale and saying, well, these guys, these little guys over here that you talked of earlier are somehow better than the other startups that are trying to gain traction in Silicon Valley that only have the private market to supply them with capital?
You know, in the end, we make judgments about it.